Hi, it's me, Roosevelt. Wow, I feel like I've been really MIA recently. Sorry about that. Listen, I've been on an anxiety roller coaster recently because, as you may have heard, we're in the middle of a hostile government takeover. And I've been spiraling, dreading the prospect of the most boring and cringe techno-feudalist dystopia. Concerning, but enough of that, we're here to have fun, because we just got a new book this patch. Uh-oh, Grandma Roosevelt is about to go off the deep end with those darn books. Okay, context. Back during the Sumeru interlude, Scaramouche deleted himself from Irminsul, erasing himself from everyone's memories. But Nahida preserved the memories of Scaramouche through a fable she created. So, in theory, fables and fiction can preserve the secrets of the world. I've used this line of reasoning to justify my hyperfixation on many books. Legend of the Shattered Halberd, Flowers for Princess Fischl, Time Trekker, etc. Men of Lithin is a 3-volume book series that has become popular in Natlan. It's authored by a mysterious Fontanian author named Kinyan, which is sus because that name does not sound Faunch at all, and also no one has actually met or heard of this author. More on that later. But the book itself is about a world on the brink of destruction, but this destruction was actually planned in advance because of a very mysterious past, and there's a group that doesn't want this to happen. Yeah. Anyway, so as a disclaimer, my stance in general is that Endgame books usually have a bunch of different stories and truths rolled into them, and also this is my personal take on Men of Lithin, and I do think there's a lot up for interpretation. So don't take me as gospel, but I at least want to tease out interesting tidbits. Leave your own theories in the comments. Now, let's start with a summary of the story. The book is set in a high-tech metropolis, with a gold liquid flowing through everything. This gold liquid is called Lithin, and it basically powers the entire city, from revolutionizing agriculture to connecting to other cities. An organization called the Technocracy discovered it 100 years ago. It was buried in an ancient settlement deep underground, called Natlantea. But the Technocratic Assembly was the only one to have access to Natlantea, and thus Lithin production. So they've had sole control over this important energy source for civilization. This has caused disputes between the cities, and the shadow of war now looms over society. This is an important plot point, so keep it in mind. Now to the story. Despite this strife, a continental fair is being held, so there's joy and celebration in the air. The Technocratic Assembly organized it to celebrate peace and innovation, even if said innovation from all this Lithin might also cause eventual destruction.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
And this is where you come into the picture. The story, interestingly, uses a second-person narrative with you as the protagonist. I think this narrative device is actually super important to what the story is trying to tell us, so definitely keep this in mind towards the end of the video. So, you are a detective, and you are not having a good time, dog, because this celebration doesn't change the fact that things are getting real bad. A few weeks ago, a group of insurrectionists destroyed the Lithin transfer hub in the city of Soth. This group of insurgents is called the Heralds of the Unenlightened, and they claim that Lithin is demonic and destroying the world. So you, as a detective, have been recruited to investigate this shady society. Alongside you is a short, rotund man named Akra. So you two scope things out, and just after a few days, you find a hiding spot of the Unenlightened in a decrepit church. They're transporting something in and out every day. You surveil them for a few weeks to sneak in and get more evidence. One day, all of them seemingly leave, and you go in. Once you're in the church, there's the smell of formaldehyde everywhere, and stacks of strange metal vats along the wall. And they all have labels that just say, ignorance. Then suddenly, someone grabs you from behind. Oh no! You kick open a metal vat and are overwhelmed with the stench of formaldehyde. It clears your mind and you see the person who grabbed you, a twisted face with only 2 empty eye sockets. He's screaming the words, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" You realize he's blind, so you're Gucci for an escape. As you're making your getaway, you grab one of the metal vats to take with you. And you bump into Akra. But you look up to see a face that seems almost half man, half machine. A skeleton with a sunken visage with lifeless, hollow eyes. This being you once knew as Akra speaks to you frankly. He says, "You saw it, didn't you, Unenlightened One?" This is where it gets super weird. Akra gestures towards a cultivation tank that has a strange specimen in it. It has a colossal head and slender arms that are connected to a reptilian body via thousands of threads. Akra tells you, this is the last human specimen in the world. Okay, pause. You inquire, this is the last human specimen? But if that's human, then what are we? This next part becomes a Q&A with Akra, but let me try to summarize this chronologically. In ancient times, the civilization of original humans had descended into war, and it covered the planet in a toxic substance. So, the surviving humans turned themselves into Lithin and hid underground, and created a new species that could survive up top. This synthetic species of little gray men would fix the planet by biodegrading the harmful substance until the surface was habitable again. However, the original humans and their little gray men are incompatible, so only one can survive. So, the original humans leveraged this pure energy created from their existence, Lithin, to give to the little gray men and stoke war and conflict. And once the new species self-destructs, the original humans re-emerge and take over. However, there was a small minority of the original humans, though, that did not want to turn into Lithin and join their little hive mind, because they wanted to preserve their individuality. These are the unenlightened. So instead of turning into Lithin, they live out incarnation after incarnation among the little gray men. And plot twist, you are actually the leader of the unenlightened. You have actually lived out many incarnations. You remember each memory of sages and poets and warriors. And after each memory, you see a figure of someone before you. You can't remember what they say to you, but all you know is you yearn for them. The end. Okay, so cool story, but what the is actually going on? At the risk of redundancy, I want to carefully explain what Akra told us, but also tie in thematic connections we've seen throughout the game. Again, disclaimer, I will be inserting some of my own interpretation here. So, we have two species. The original humans with colossal heads attached to reptilian bodies, and the little gray men. The original human civilization descended into war and it covered the land in a toxic substance. So the surviving humans turned themselves into Lithin, a pure energy, storing it deep underground. As Lithin, they're a hive mind, kinda like Deshret's golden slumber or Renee's plan to dissolve all the souls of Fontaine together as one. The original humans then created the little gray men who would live on the surface and biodegrade the toxic substance until the original humans could re-emerge. The original humans and little gray men are biologically opposite and cannot coexist. Akra explains their biological function is opposite to ours, where we thrive is toxic to them and vice versa. So, only one species could survive, so the original humans basically counted on the little gray men to become dependent on Lithin to the point they would destroy themselves. Now, of the original humans, a small minority did not want to join the hive mind. These are the unenlightened. Instead, they are incarnated over and over again amongst the little gray men. Kinda like Sumeru's samsaras. When you recall your memories, they're punctuated by a figure talking, which kinda reminds me of the Sub-Zeru's festival, where each day ended with a beep. Akra is an original human, specifically an enlightened one. When you ask him what we are, he distances himself, saying you are a little gray man. Also, he's very disparaging of the senseless morals of the unenlightened. The last original human specimen implies none of their bodies exist anymore, so instead, it seems like he inhabits a skeleton machine. kinda like how Remurians use the golden ichor to infuse their souls into stone golems. In contrast, the blind man you encounter is a little gray man, so they have hollow sockets for eyes amongst their twisted features. And given that he's in the Herald's hideout, the church, he's most certainly an unenlightened who was reincarnated as a little gray man. So, both original human machines and little gray men exist in society. However, everyone looks like a normal human. This is because the little gray men have glands in their brains that secrete a gas called the fog of reason. This prevents people from seeing the world as it truly is. But by inhaling ignorance, you can see the true forms of everyone. As a reminder, ignorance is the fumes of formaldehyde which was being contained in the metal vats. So the unenlightened are continuously incarnated with the implication they forget everything. But with ignorance, they can remember their past and their purpose. So as I've noted, there are some clear parallels to big themes already, but I want to focus in on the name of the ancient ruins. Natlantea. Natlantea is the underground city ruins where Lithin originates. The name is interesting because Natlantea is previously mentioned by some Narzissenkreuz Ordo notes. These notes describe the origin of the Narzissenkreuz Tower and the spiritual evolution of man across samsaras. The design of the Tower of Ipsissimus is based on an old Remurian concept of a powerful will that can rule, sustain, or destroy the world. Given that Ipsissimus means superlative self, this is a reference to the will of a descender. They go on to say that the architecture represents the spiritual evolution of the human soul. They list 4 cycles: Hyperborea, Natlantea, Remuria, and Khaenri'ah. These cycles coincide with certain themes. The human spirit undergoes the loss of paradise, the defeat of evil dragons, the original sin and baptism, and finally, freedom from the gods. While the note clarifies that these names are arbitrary, we can perhaps see why thematically these names were chosen. For example, Fontaine's story is all about Egeria's sin and the Oceanid people being sinners and being literally baptized by Nouvelette's dragon juice. God, I wish that were me. We're in the middle of the last samsara, and Khaenri'ah might be a reference to Khaenri'ah. So we're probably in the seize the authority of the heavens and fuck them gods era. Now, Natlantea corresponds to the defeat of evil dragons during this spiritual evolution. Natlan has a unique history where the dragons continued to rule even after their defeat in Teyvat. Eventually, Xbalanque vanquished the abyss-corrupted pyro-sovereign Chu'ulel. So, Men of Lithin, amongst its many references, is giving a huge nod to this specific era of strife. I mean, even the start of the book references some important yet unnamed flame being stolen 3,000 years ago. And I guess we simply didn't need any more detail on that. But in particular, this seems to set up some parallels with Washaklahun Uba Khan, the Sage of the Stolen Flame. During this era where the dragons ruled and before Xbalanque conquered the Pyro Sovereign, he had devised plans for the profane path of evolution. Basically, he wanted to experiment with dragonkind and mankind in order to create a transcendent species, which, as I speculated in some previous videos, was probably to overcome Natlan's little abyss problem. Also, Akra similarly cites individual will as a barrier to evolution, just as the Sage did. Now, I don't think it's a one-to-one with Men of Lithin with creating a disposable species to overcome toxic pollution, but I think the loose theme is definitely there. But I think this goes much deeper. And I think it goes back to this individual will I just mentioned, this barrier to evolution. Okay, so the original humans turned themselves into Lithin and basically crafted a huge plan to create a species that they would eventually destroy for the sake of the livelihood of their own civilization. Akra is one of these beings. Given that the technocracy sent him to join you during the investigation, it suggested that the technocratic assembly itself is a machination of the original humans. I mean, they do coincidentally control all the Lithin production. At one point, Akra makes an interesting offhand comment where he flippantly mentions psychohistory. This is an important concept to Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. Oh, fun fact, the Twitter guy apparently loves this series and named his recent children after some characters in the books. If only he took care of his other 50 children. Concerning. Anyway, psychohistory in this context is a science of studying how people respond to economic and societal stimuli as a whole. In the Foundation series, the science is used to foresee the downfall of the Galactic Empire. Although it cannot be stopped, this science is used to mitigate the loss and quicken the recovery. So, the parallel to Men of Lithin might be clear. The original humans, or even the Technocratic Assembly, have carefully planned the entire history of little gray mankind and its destruction. And as it turns out, the Sage of the Stolen Flame also does exactly this. The Sage had explicitly devised plans to manipulate humanity. For example, through creating fictional stories like the Jade of Return, or posing as people like T2 or Legba to forge a narrative, kinda like how Akra was in disguise. But I also think the book is really getting at a big theme that's core to the Little Buddy Quest series. Like, the Sage makes a huge deal about only how dragons can evolve, but humans have this unique will and can dominate their environment. So I think the big idea that they're getting at here is this question of what it means to be human. So in the book, first of all, no one is really human as we know it, but the emphasis here is that these species cannot coexist. But there's also the unenlightened original humans. They resisted this plan to become Lithin and destroy the little gray men, and favored retaining individual will over a hive mind. We can presume this has been going on for generations. The ending of the book describes how the unenlightened are constantly reincarnated. But with each incarnation, the enlightened hoped that they would choose to join them and embrace the hive mind and the plan. The book closes with the question, what will your answer be? The implication here is that the answer to rejoining the original humans has always been no, and will continue to be no. The two major themes then, in my opinion, are the preservation of the individual will, but also this idea that these two species cannot coexist. The first point is echoed constantly throughout the game. I mean, an obvious example, Deshret and Siraj both wanted to create hive minds, and they were in contradiction to and weakened by individuality. The Narzissenkreuz Ordo also says that by excising the self, that is, to dissolve yourself into a hive mind, you can avoid receiving a vision. They frame it as an issue of not being tied to the gods, but it also means a loss of personal ambition. For this second point, consider this. The inability for the two species to coexist remind me of Enkanomiya. Enkanomiya is an old civilization that sank into the realm of the Dragonairs. Bishops originally preyed on humans, but humans made Enkanomiya their home via the light of the Dainichi Mikoshi. Even Watatsumi has a holy soil effect, which is said to be due to the Bishop realm trying to reclaim its domain. The ceremony to fix the phenomenon is literally using Oribashi's Blood Branch Coral to suppress the Dragonair of the depth. There is no friendship is magic resolution to the conflict here. However, now this reminds me a lot of the Tenyu Vale World Quest. In it, Tenyu Vale is returning to nature and it's ruining the tea business. The big cat lady was fiddling with the spirit veins to bring back the natural state of things before humans changed the land. But at the conclusion of the quest, Carp Lady is able to reconcile with Big Cat Lady, with the acknowledgement that life can coexist, and perhaps friendship is magic. This theme of coexistence also resonates in both Nouvelette's character and his stories. In one of them we're posed the question, could it not be that King Nibelung had been wrong, and that the Black Void could only be opposed if all life were to band together as one? You know, because no one fights alone. So, going back to the book, perhaps the Unenlightened also saw the original humans and the Technocratic Assembly's plans as inherently flawed for similar reasons. So, I do think we have these themes of coexistence and also the indomitable spirit of the individual will. But just as a fun side note, the Technocratic Assembly may have real-life inspirations. A technocracy is a hypothetical form of governance ruled by experts and scientists. In the 1930s, a bunch of nerds created Technocratic Incorporate, which proposed that money be replaced by energy certificates. which may be a parallel to how Lithin as an energy source is the most valuable currency. Also, random trivia, there was this one member of the Canadian technocracy movement who had really problematic viewpoints and sympathized with the wrong side during World War II. He would end up getting arrested and he would move to South Africa because he was a super fan of apartheid. You probably won't recognize his name, but he certainly has a famous grandson. I guess yikes and cringe run in the family. Concerning. Anyway, there's yet another theme that's really present throughout the game that I think is really highlighted in this book, and that's one of wisdom versus folly. The Unenlightened are initially described as a band of Luddites left behind in the wake of progress. Even their title makes them out to be bumbling and foolish. The fog of reason clouds their minds so they can't see the truth of the world. It is only ignorance that lets them see the world for what it is. However, in all of this, you do have to remember it is the Enlightened Ones that are the ones planning for the destruction of the surface. So, it seems that the book is trying to create some sort of juxtaposition of knowledge versus foolishness, or truth versus lies. And not just that, but also subverting their meanings. We have a lot of that kind of imagery in-game already. One example, the Fatui are literally the fools. Piero could not earn the favor of the king of Khaenri'ah because he wasn't learned enough, but it was the knowledgeable sages who tore away the veil of sin, ushering in the destruction of Khaenri'ah. He also said this in Winter Night's Lazo: "We alone know the virtue in these acts of folly." So here, folly is being equated with virtue, truth, and even true wisdom. Another example, the Abyss Order. To them, the Abyss is the truth or true way. Abyss lectors have a line saying that the truth shall set you free, and Klingzer wrote a note about how abyssal power is truth and gospel. Even the sign of Apausha was known to Khaenri'ahns as the sign of truth. But here's the thing. We also know that abyssal corruption seems to affect one's lucidity. For example, with abyssal corruption syndrome, people are trapped in a mind cage of their own fears. We witnessed this in the Natlan interlude with Capitano. This was also a huge point of the recent Inazuma event, where the residual abyssal corruption of Chiyo caused the Baketenuki to see threats where they did not exist. These are just two examples of how folly and wisdom are flipped. So the fog of reason in Men of Lithin clouds one's ability to see the truth of this world. The opening line of the book even calls the period as an age of enlightenment, which we learn probably just means that people can't see the true forms of others. Remember, it is only ignorance that allows them to see the truth. One thing I'd like to note about this ignorance, though. The book specifies that it's fumes of formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is an organic compound IRL. First of all, it's weird for a fantasy book within a fantasy game to reference it. So formaldehyde has a lot of industrial uses and dated applications in disinfectants and photography, but the main thing we all know it for is embalming, as in preserving corpses. This is a super odd choice. I mean, they could have been inspired by some sort of dissociative psychoactive substance. There's a lot of stuff out there which really make you lose your sense of reality. I mean, just look at Twitter guy. Concerning. Anyway, so I think there's something really to this specific formaldehyde reference. Let me string a picture together. In Men of Lithin, the fumes of a substance used to preserve the body after death can allow people to see the truth of the world. Now, I don't have fully formed ideas, but I do want to point out that recent patches have emphasized themes of life and death, and the border between the two. Like with Natlan and the Night Kingdom, which seems to be a real physical place, and also with the Lantern Rite event, where Fetter is leaking from the border of life and death. At its conclusion, Ningguang suggests that this leakage might have something to do with the events in Natlan. That is, Renova's code breaking and Capitano rewriting some rules, which is all incidentally followed up by the event with Chiyo's residual corruption, which makes people falsely perceive danger and evil that isn't there. Honestly, I don't have a proper conclusion or theory for this, but I don't think I necessarily need one. Maybe I'll make a follow-up theory sometime, but I will say, this must be pointing towards some future plot points surrounding life, death, and truth. Now, we still have this very mysterious author who has never been heard of and can't be located. First off, Kinyan is the name of a city in H.P. Lovecraft mythos, allegedly located underground beneath Oklahoma, in case you've ever wondered what goes on in the Panhandle. I've covered Lovecraft mythos inspirations before, and many others, including Ashikai and some Reddit users, have talked about Kinyan specifically, but I won't dive into that here. I will say though, I bet Twitter Guy would have loved HP, and not because he loves horror literature or that he can even read. Concerning. Anyway, here's what I actually find most intriguing about the book though. I don't know who Kinyan really is, but I think we can make some inferences about what they know. Now remember, I pointed out that the book is written in second person, with the author addressing you as the main character. There's a line in the final volume that stands out to me. It reads, "The only reason I can perceive this creature's hideous form right now is that I inhaled the gas known as ignorance, a substance that I myself had created in my previous incarnation." This is not said by either you or Akra. Instead, it's a switch to the first person. Perhaps you could imagine, then, that the author is inserting themselves as a character here, as the narrator. Up until this first-person line, they were seemingly completely omniscient and removed from the story. So this is my personal speculation, but they seem to reveal a lot about themselves through this. First off, here's one thing we can deduce. Because they created the ignorance substance, Kinyan would also have been an original human, specifically an unenlightened, because they cite doing this in a previous incarnation. But Kinyan is unique because they basically created a way for the unenlightened to see the truth of this world. So, assuming the author is inserting themselves here, maybe in the near future we might meet another all-knowing mysterious entity who appears totally human to us, but we'll need our version of ignorance to see who they truly are. This is just me thinking out loud, so it could be something entirely different. I may be totes wrong. But we do have to remember that the sky is fake, the stars are a hoax, and so many things in Teyvat can truly be illusory. And in my opinion, no matter the case, I think they're still trying to tell us something about Teyvat using some allegories and shared themes. For example, with coexistence, individual will, and the blurring of knowledge and ignorance. Again, I have no solid conclusion or theory, but I just want to tease apart some interesting takeaways of this book. So, my final thoughts about all of this. Men of Lithin is a super interesting book, but I do have a huge problem here. I really wish they'd rename Ella Musk. Like, her inspiration is literally the most brain-dead cringelord. I'm sorry, you're asking me to help Ella Musk to communicate with Hilly Churls? And meanwhile, I'm just reminded that Twitter Guy is chainsaw!
Chainsaw!
Anyway, so I propose we rename Ella Musk to something less controversial. Okay, let's just rename her Trisha Paytas. But please, God, HOYO-verse, deliver us from this cringe. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share your own Men of Lithin theories in the comments. Again, as I said in the beginning, sorry this took so long to get out. I appreciate y'all watching. And also, have you checked your smoke detector batteries recently? Okay, thanks, bye.